Awesome. Very good. Let's get started.
Yeah, awesome. Welcome everyone to another live session of Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. This is our fourth live session of the year, and Chris and I are doing this twice a month. And then the other 2 Tuesdays per month, there's going to be pre-recorded content. And if you're joining us for the first time, you can catch every episode of Tech Talk Tuesday Live that we've done for the last 2 years. It's all on YouTube on the Baseline channel, which is web training, all one word. And we've actually got a lot of people using that now to just get up to speed on how our technology works and how to implement the solutions that we've kind of been talking about here on Tech Talk Tuesday for the last couple of years. And that even includes internal folks at Baseline and the HydroPoint organization. We're finding it useful to go back, watch, learn from the sessions that we've been doing live. So we appreciate everybody joining us today. I'm Andy Humphrey, Irrigation Technology Consultant for Baseline. We have Chris Wright. He is the VP of Sales. And today we're going to be talking about the power of PipeView. And some of you may know about PipeView. It may be new for others. And we're going to kind of talk about why it matters and how to think of it and kind of the story behind it. But we're not going to go into like what buttons to click to set it up and such. That'll be for like an actual training session. This is going to be for that sort of thought leadership on why we even have PipeView to begin with, the purpose of it, and then how you can utilize it in your own business. So
absolutely. Yep. And it kind of plays into also the theme that we've got for the month within the HydroPoint organization, where we're, emphasizing remote water management. And PipeView is a, great tool for a user to visually see what's happening with their hydraulic structure and their irrigation system at a glance using this powerful tool. Mm-hmm. So let's get started speaking to it and how it falls into our engineered irrigation solutions, right? Obviously, we work hard and we speak often to the hardware that we engineer and manufacture at Baseline, utilizing that proprietary 2-wire technology and real-time data to enhance system performance. But there's also a software component to it as well that's in the cloud that is a solution for a user to manage and monitor their system as well. And that's where PipeView comes into play as a powerful tool as a solution in managing irrigation systems.
And Chris, it's probably a good moment to say that we had some feedback come in. Actually, you did. You were telling me about this early this morning, that we had a new user to Baseline, someone that didn't really know a lot about the different tools and technologies that we offer. And the more that they started to learn about it, the more they went, wow, this is even more powerful than a lot of golf systems. Wow, you guys can do a lot. Wow, absolutely. Now I understand why you call it engineered solutions. There's so much you can do with this technology. And they're absolutely right, because what we make are kind of, as I said before, ingredients that you can build lots of recipes from. And that engineering is essentially a recipe of taking the different technologies, putting them together in order to meet the demands of that particular site.
Definitely. Absolutely. So as we start talking about this remote water management, it's kind of interesting to look at some brand new, fresh data that actually just came to print this morning that you happened to find just as we were preparing for today's session that, shows the industry trends based on the landscape industry and what their focuses are going to be for 2022. Right.
Yep. And this was a survey filled out by contractors.
And where is this article found?
This was published by the Irrigation Association in the latest edition of Irrigation and Lighting. I believe that's the website, Irrigation and Lighting publication. So it's fresh as of 6 a.m. this morning when it dropped in my email.
Very cool. So the reason why we're showing this is because it speaks directly to what today's topic is. Which of the following trends do you expect to grow the most in 2022? 52% said smart irrigation technologies. right? Baseline certainly falls into that category, and more so. And then remote irrigation system management is number 2 at 30%, right? So being able to remotely view your irrigation system and or systems, if you've got multiple sites or multiple controllers that you are monitoring, is becoming more and more the norm, more and more the expectation in the industry. And as technology expands and we get more bandwidth, if you will, in the cloud, we can put different devices into the cloud that we can then monitor and manage from any device connected to the internet.
Yep. And then there's different levels. So first level could just be, hey, I want to change a runtime. Okay. Easy over the counter. And what we're going to move into here is going to be quite the view, like what you can see on a very large, which doesn't have to be large, but on a very large, complicated hydraulic system with, a potential of 4,000 zones, which is the capacity of a baseline hydraulic system. The view that we can see through PipeView is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. All right. So before we get to PipeView, the overall arching platform that you can access PipeView through is known as what, Andy?
App Manager.
App Manager. All right. Once you get into App Manager, you then be able to access PipeView, and we'll go there live in just a moment. But just to give you a 30,000 foot view of what PipeView is, it's essentially an illustrative model of your hydraulic structure, right? Where you've got a controller or a controllers that are connected or being sourced by one or more water sources. And then you've got, your piping structure going to your valve manifolds, which are then operating your zones, right? Sometimes that's very straightforward. Other times it can be very complex, and having the ability to view how your water is flowing through that hydraulic structure can be very powerful.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to this analogy of a whiteboard. It happens to be that the screen does look like a whiteboard to some extent, but when someone would come to me with a site they need some help, a problem that they need solving, and they start talking about, hey, I've got this well, and then it feeds this main line, and then it goes over here to this other area. The first thing I usually ask them is, can you just sketch me a picture, like on a napkin, on a piece of paper, just sketch a picture. I don't care what it looks like, and then send it to me, because I need to visually know that we're talking about the same thing, that the way I see it is the way you see it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And we know from experience, typically whenever a whiteboard is needed in the design process or in the thought process in developing the design intent for a system, it's a baseline project for sure.
Yeah, we're trying to engineer it, as simple as a whiteboard. That is an engineered solution.
For sure. All right. So it's what we're looking at here at a zoomed out scale is a hydraulic structure. We've got a water source here. We've got a couple of control points that are managing water into the mainline system. And then downstream of the control points, we've got other control points or mainline to mainline connections where we may have different design flows or flow characteristics associated with those pipe sizes that are then feeding irrigation zones or valves, right? So here, got a pretty, complex system in that we've got one water source, we've got a bypass scenario, we've got multiple main lines, we've got, additional control points. So how can we view that so it's helpful to understand how water's going through the system? So if we zoom in, we can see, we've got control points of different sizes. Here we've got one that's 6 inch, and then we've got a bypass that's 1.5 inches, right? And how are those operating when the system is operating to make sure that we've got enough water to fill the main line to supply the demand of the valves that are associated with those control points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's helpful to see it this way, because otherwise we're seeing it in menus in a control box or menus in the programming. And so this helps, at least the way I've experienced it, this helps validate, did I set up those menu options the way that it needs to be to make sure visually that it's done correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to answer a few, pretty simplified questions here in a moment. But if we look at this, closely, here we've got a control point with the master valve and a flow meter and a pressure transducer. And then below that, we've got another control point that's got a master valve and a flow meter associated with it, right? So one of the important questions we'll answer is, what needs to happen in order for that to function correctly?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we can click on and zoom into one of these control points to see real-time flow and pressure data as the system is operating. So we can verify if we've actually got enough, flow happening to fulfill the ultimate design flow. Do we have enough going on at this time, or can we turn on more?
Right.
Or do we have enough pressure to sustain that many zones operating at one time so that we're not compromising the performance of those sprinkler heads, which then in turn has a direct result on the amount of water that's used during those irrigation cycles.
Yeah, all of these are tools, like you said at the very beginning, Chris, to enhance the performance of the system. I mean, that's really the goal, is to have the system performing as best that it could possibly be performing.
Yep. All right, so let's pull up a live site, shall we?
Okay.
And take a look at their hydraulic structure. So if I go into baselineapps.net, it's the login page for App Manager. I sign in, and it then gives me the framework where I've got available different applications that can be used to manage my system. So Base Manager is typically where your programming is done. We're going to access PipeView. Now, is PipeView available to every App Manager login, Andy?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this up, because it's important that we mention that PipeView is specific to the 3200 control platform.
So if you're operating a network of 1,000 controllers, PipeView would not be available, but it is available with every 3,200 controller. Yeah. So even
that's why we kind of classify the 3,200 as a water management control platform, and the 1,000 a little bit more of a water monitoring platform, because its level of hydraulic sophistication is, entry level ish when compared to the 3,200 platform. And the more complicated the setup becomes, the more the visualization matters.
Yeah. Yep. Because when we look at the 3,200, we've got, scalability that is quite, extensive. So you've got, 200 zones of controller, you've got, 8 control points of controller, but then we can also have multiple controllers that are operating from different water sources, and the ability to create those sub mainline configurations as well, that would then require a flow station in the mix so that the system can operate in an automated fashion to the design flow for that hydraulic system, and also to operate within a water window that may be a restraint or a requirement. Okay, so if I go into PipeView, let's take a look at a real live site.
And this is live, so sometimes we don't know what we're going to get, because we're looking at data in real time. So someone could be out there, something could be working, not working. This is live.
And we were looking at this earlier, and it was actually watering. So we'll see if it populates and indicates that it still is.
Yeah. Would this be a good time, Chris, for me to just sort of start the conversation about kind of the story of the water?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, and really,
absolutely.
that's a kind of a way that we want you to think of any site is it's, the story of the water. How do you tell the story of the water, see the story of the water, and understand the entire story of the water? And, really the first question that comes to mind is, where does the water come from? And I'm probably, depending on your view of what we're doing right now, my picture might be small because you've got your screen shared, Chris, but we'd like to ask, where does the water come from? And really ask the question, it comes from this source over here. Well, okay, is there another source above that? Like, we really want to know where the water comes from originally.
Yeah. And we know that we're seeing more and more projects where you've got a primary source and then a secondary source. And that primary source may be a, water cistern or a surface water, groundwater that you're pumping from, or it may be municipal connection, right? So understanding where the water's coming from is, important in setting up the configuration of that hydraulic structure.
And sometimes managing where that water's coming from correctly, it could in fact be the most important part of the project. Yes, sprinklers are coming on, but it might be that the client, the owner, where the water comes from is priority, like number one. Got to get that right.
Yeah,
that might be the problem that we're solving.
Correct.
And so in PipeView, just to keep this moving, that becomes the top of the food chain, if you will. That's the start. Chris has labeled here, WS for water source, because that's where all of this begins.
Yep.
And it's important to remember that the water source isn't a controllable data point, but a control point is what we control. So the water source is simply the source. We add the control point to give ourselves a point of control along that hydraulic system.
Correct. Yeah. So as we look at this site, we've got 3 different water sources that are feeding the, irrigation system on site, and they're broken into 3 different, hydraulic structures. So this is one, this is another, and then this is the third, right? So if we were to zoom in, and unfortunately it's not watering anymore, Andy. So we're not getting our color coding, but, in answering that question, where does the water come from? We're then able to see where that water source is feeding that site and the various control points and zones associated with it. Right. So that, brings up the second question. Once we've identified where the water comes from, we need to know where the water needs to go.
Yeah. Where does it need to go? And that seems like a very simple question. We're talking about irrigation, right? And yeah, we are, but we want to know, where does it need to go? And it's not always irrigation. We get involved more and more with projects that, oh, by the way, I need to have a fountain filled, or by the way, I need to move water from this pond over to this pond. There's other aspects coming into play that we really need to know where it comes from, and then think about, where does it need to go at the end?
All right. So I just created the chandelier effect, if you will, right? So you can now see all of the zones that are associated with this water source. And within this water source, there's actually 3 different 3200 controllers that are on site that are being fed from that water source, that are then operating these zones downstream. Right. So if we have the question, where does the water need to go? Let's say I need to water this zone right here that is associated with a individual control point and then a mainline structure. How does that water need to flow through that structure in order to be delivered here?
Yeah. And it's important to know where it needs to go, because it could need to go somewhere at 100 gallons a minute, and it could need to go somewhere at 3 gallons a minute. And knowing where it needs to go is important, because you may need to influence that water along the way between 100 gallons a minute or just a 3 gallon a minute.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And something else that we've discovered, right, is that, if you've got one water source or a control point at your primary, water source with a design flow, that does not necessarily mean that the design flow or the flow characteristics are going to be the same at a control point that may be downstream from it, right? So on the graph that we showed previously, there was a 12% difference between the flow at a control point downstream from the primary water source than there was at the water source itself. So being able to assign zones to main lines and main lines to control points and control points to water sources, all of those are going to have different design flows associated with them. And in order to manage it correctly for concurrent operation, manage it by flow, we need to have more resolution in order to do that. And, the baseline engineered flow allows us to do that. And then PipeView allows us to see it as it's operating in real time.
And a lot of the time, it's not just a 2-inch pipe running all the way throughout the system. It might be a 4-inch pipe and a 3-inch pipe and a 2-inch pipe, and then, maybe a 1-inch pipe or what have you, or a combination of that. And so it's important to know, kind of how does it get there? How does it go from that source at the beginning to that zone at the end? How is it getting there, so that you can then decide, how do you want to manage it through that piping structure along the way?
Mm-hmm. All right. Then what other things does this allow us to see, Andy, that we spoke to earlier? If this zone here is one of the most important zones on the property, how can we use PipeView to verify if it is in fact the highest priority zone on the property?
Yeah, and there are often cases where a zone has priority, either because there's new seed going down, or it's a pond fill. It doesn't, there's numerous reasons why a zone would have a priority. And if it's set up correctly in the schedule with, priority number 1, that means if anything else is running, that particular schedule goes to the top of the list and waters. And so you can log into PipeView, you can see the story of the water, and you can see, oh, good, my high priority zone is watering like it should be. And it helps sort of, create that story and paint that picture and give you that view of where's the water going and is it flowing there correctly?
Correct. Yep. And is the system configured and set up correctly in the programming to make sure that, the water is going through that structure the way we think it is, so that it's enhancing the performance of the system.
And
so
PipeView is, the kind of the value of PipeView increases with the larger the site, not entirely, but that's often the case, that the larger the site, the more value PipeView can bring, because the more complicated it is, the better a visual can help you.
Absolutely, for sure. So that next question that we ask ourselves in simplest terms, right? What needs to happen along the way? So let's say we've got a scenario where we've got zones that are on this mainline leg that are part of a program that also includes zones on this leg of mainline, right? And of course, in a baseline system with our search and assign capabilities, we're assigning zones to programs that can cross over different main lines, right?
Right. That was actually a fundamental code change, was assigning the zone to a main line, not to a program. So you could have a program with 3 zones, and each of those zones could be on a different main line.
Correct. Right. And so if we've got that scenario, what needs to happen along the way to make sure that any control points that may be in our hydraulic structure are in the right configuration to be able to deliver water to zones that may be on different main lines, right? So that's one of the powerful functions of the flow station technology that we're going to speak to in the next live Tech Talk Tuesday, is we can group control points together so that if we have a normally closed control point, i.e. a normally closed master valve anywhere in this hydraulic structure, we know that if this zone is calling for water, it needs to open this control point as well as opening the primary control point in order for water to flow and get there. Okay, so being able to visually see that as it's happening in real time is a very valuable confirmation that the system is operating as intended and delivering the desired outcomes that you want in the programming.
Yep. And because we're looking in this view across controllers, we don't have to log into one controller, log into another. We're seeing, everything on the hydraulics, but it's not specific to a controller, right? We don't have, controllers are not on this diagram. This is just the hydraulics.
Correct.
But it's not going into a controller, which would be like kind of the old fashioned way, I guess.
Yeah. So if we look at that, I click on one of these control points, it then opens a specific view for that control point, and it does not have a flow sensor associated with it, but we see that it's on controller West 1, right? If I click on this control point, we see that it's on controller West 3. So totally different controllers here feeding different hydraulics on the system, right? And then the flow station is managing the operation of these controllers based on the flow demands from the programming in order to operate those concurrently to meet the overall design flow of the system itself.
And that's really a good way to look at it, is the system's job is to keep the pipe full of as much water as possible. If it is set to run 200 gallons a minute, its job is to figure out how to, in real time, maintain as close to that maximum as possible, so that those water windows, continue to stay as tight as possible.
For sure. Awesome. Yeah. All right. So a question came in, wanting to know what level of sign-in is required in order to get PipeView. So you've got.
I don't believe it's a sign-in level. It's a 3200 level. Is that right?
Yeah, it's if you've got a 3200, then it will give you the PipeView option. In the menu to access that.
Because PipeView is a view. It's not something that you configure, or there's no settings. It's a view of previously configured settings in other menus. And if you're not seeing PipeView, it could be because you're logging into basemanager.net and instead of into the app manager framework. So just double check that you're logging into baseline apps.
Correct. Excellent point. And then another question, how does this get built? Right? That's a good question, because you don't have to build it. It builds itself as you configure the, water source setup and programming setup in the 3200 itself in Base Manager. So as you're building that out in Base Manager and setting up your controller, it will then auto populate PipeView based on that configuration.
Yep. And then you can check PipeView, get a visual. Did I set this up correctly? And we know that most systems most systems are one water source. So it kind of just looks very linear. Water source, control point, main line, zones, just boom, linearly. This is a complex system because we're, I guess, trying to impress you and show you the capability. But I would encourage you log into PipeView and check out your system, see if it's configured correctly.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times you'll see, oh, I guess we missed setting up the master valve. Or man, I'm not seeing my flow sensor. Shoot, I didn't configure that incorrectly.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. We're at the bottom of the hour already.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Hopefully that was some good information for you all. Again, hopefully it created a little bit of thought leadership for you, made you curious about getting in and using PipeView as a tool to help you manage and monitor your system. And we'll continue the conversation on the next live episode, which I believe is the 22nd of the month, where we're going to be doing a deep dive on the FlowStation 3200 technology.
Yeah. And I guess my final words would be, give it some thought on your next, either your existing project or your next one. Where does the water come from? Where does it need to go? And what happens to it in between? Because what happens to it in between, you have control over. There's some things you can do to the system to enhance that performance when you start thinking about what needs to happen to this water.
For sure. All right. Let's get back out there, work hard, be safe. And we will talk to you next time we are live for Tech Talk Tuesday. Appreciate your support, your interest. Thank you very much,
everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.